they really have no idea how threatening some laws are for our farmers. That really doesn't work in the practice.
It's very clear what politicians should do. All the things that you've promised you would do them.
Obviously, the hope in politicians is not very high here.
Vergiss, was du über politische Debatten weißt. Zur Europawahl 2024 wagen wir etwas Neues. Wählerinnen und Wähler stehen im Zentrum der Diskussion. Und PolitikerInnen stellen Fragen zu den großen Themen unserer Zeit. Wie der Klimakrise.
I'm Brittany. I'm active in Extinction Rebellion in Spain to face the climate crisis and to escape of the climate collapse. We as the people have to take the power back.
I'm Justine. I'm a young farmer from Belgium. The main thing that we have to do to fight climate change is to make sure that everybody in this continent takes his responsibility and make sure that they want to choose for a more sustainable life.
Ja oder nein? Betrifft dich der Klimawandel persönlich?
For me, at a personal level, I feel like completely powerless because we have known that we were going into the collapse for decades. And how can it be that the political system has been failing us year after year and that it has to come to the generation of youth with Fridays for Future saying it that this is not possible, that action must be taken?
I am a Belgian farmer, and why climate change affects me, that's because it's a real practice. Our climate is really our workplace. And my father said, last 10 years it is always too much, too wet or too hot. And we feel that a lot in crop failures. Right now I'm a young farmer, I'm 22 years old, and I'm thinking to take over the family farm. But when I decide to do that, that will be for 40 years. I know that already. But then I think, yeah, am I going to do that? So that's something in my head that say, oh, maybe you shouldn't farm because I don't know when I'm 40 or 50. What will the weather be at that point? But on the other hand, I'm very happy that I'm born in Belgium because we are here in the very innovative place here. So we have the solutions.
So in Spain, there is a clear risk of desertification. By 2100, there is 75% of the country that could become a desert. If we continue with this, that's the point of pulling the handbrake before we go to the collapse.
Ja oder nein? Sollte jede Person ihre Emissionen reduzieren, um den Planeten zu retten?
I think that individuals should take their responsibility, and then I think about like a maximum footprint level where they cannot go above it. I think that's the only way to manage climate change.
So here I like to think of the metaphor of a dam. So imagine that we have a river and there is a dam that is protecting a village, no? Because if the river got over the dam, the village would flood. The decisions that we as individuals make when deciding to consume this or consume that, like they are insignificant. They are the equivalent of if that dam has some cracks and there is water already falling into the village, of asking the people to go get a bucket and get that water and put it back in the river, instead of actually fixing the dam, or instead of actually doing a change of the river flow before. The root of the climate crisis, which is an economical system based on infinite growth and the exploitation of the most vulnerable communities, has never been addressed. So the discourse that people, individually, that we have to do something with our consumption, for me, it's an argument to shift the focus from the big corporations, the political elites that support them, that subsidize them, to the people. We need to do a big change of the economical system, what is that the big corporations, the multinational ones, that have to pay for it, and not the people.
I completely agree with you, Brittany, when you were saying that the corporation have to do the most of the work. However, in Europe, we are still part of the 10%, even of the 1% of the world, and you really don't think that they should be as well some individual action, especially from the people who are, in this top things.
So I think that we have to differentiate capitalistic altruism from real action. So if I feel good because I buy something that has a green label, I'm falling into the discourse of growth, because and the discourse that we have seen so far at EU level, because EU right now has posed on the table that the energetic transition, the green energetic transition, goes from fossil fuels to fossil fuels, from coal and oil to natural gas, liquefied natural gas. This is completely shameless. That's not an energetical transition. We need an energetical transition into renewables, and not into renewables that are at a macro level, but renewables that are managed by the people. So in a community level, so we can have this transition from a fossil fuel-based system into one that is based on renewables and on sovereignty of the people having the solar energy produced in their own communities to satisfy the needs of their own communities. And I connect it to the second part, that people need power. So we need binding people's assemblies. Not only people's assemblies, which are a process in which the whole population at a national level, we make sure that it is very well represented. So people are randomly chosen, but still making sure that they do represent society.
Well, we see that the European Parliament really pushes us, the farmers, to have new laws for us. And that's kind of threatening to us farmers. And at the end, the consumer has the choice to pay a higher price for sustainable products or food. And then, like you said, the cooperatives with the energy solar panels, I already know that there are farmers who are doing that. And I don't think that comes from European politics, but from the real entrepreneurs. So I think, in my opinion, if you really want to do something good for the climate, it's not from the politics, because I don't think you know how to manage it, in my opinion. I'm sorry. But we as farmers, we knew how to make our soil, for example, more sustainable, to grow crops on, or to reduce our energy costs by placing solar panels, or to working together. And maybe the politic, it's a task for them to let them see what is possible today for the entrepreneurs so they can pick it up.
I think we shouldn't make it a system debate. So I fundamentally disagree that it's about capitalism, market economy or not. But my question is to you. You said individual behavior is the only solution. And I think here Brittany has a point. It's not only the individuals. We have also to make political decisions to reward climate action and to punish pollution. Would you agree? And the very concrete question, you said you live in a country where there is innovation. What do you think farmers can use, and what can politicians do to make it easier for you to use these innovations?
At first, there are always people who say that like farmers are the big polluters. But in my case, I'm very young, and I learned there how to produce more sustainable food. But then I only want one thing, and that is a good price for my product. Just that, just an income. I really expect from the politicians that if they say, okay, Europe wants to be net zero in 2050, you have to make sure that the European market is protected. And like the Mercosur law, I'm sorry, but that was something I thought that it's not going to work. It's really threatening for us sustainable farmers. It's a murder for the sustainable European farmers, actually. And then, like you speak about innovations, there exists already today. A special example, we have today feed supplements for our cows that we give to them, so their methane productions reduce. And the dairy industry say, okay, you only can sell milk to us if you have those feed supplements in your ration. Okay, no problem for me to do that at all, but again, I want a good price of it because it costs me money.
Ja oder nein? Ist Innovation die Lösung, um sich an den Klimawandel anzupassen?
Can I?
Very good.
So, first of all, the question has a problem. Like, we cannot adapt to the climate crisis. We have to stop it. We have to put a handbrake to the roots causes of it. And then we'll have to deal with the symptoms. Like, no one is going to free us from that, because we've already passed on some thresholds. The 1.5 is already almost for sure that we're going to cross it. We have to stop the greed of those big corporations that make as dependent on fossil fuels to survive?
It's not yes or no, because I think it's the solution, a part of the solution, the innovations. And I give again the example of the feed supplement to give to the cows. But then it's also very important that the people change their mentality to make climate change work. That it's the whole society who changes the way. Because again, at the end, it's always a consumer who pays the price for it.
I agree with the arguments that you used. Like, I think it's obviously a market failure, the climate change, the biggest one. But we were able to fix another market failures. What kind of laws, what kind of decisions we can take? And secondly, like, democracy is not about to be right. It's about to build a majority. Because everybody thinks that it's right in their decisions. And then the point is, how we can build a majority around these arguments, because even passing some laws, like the protection of the biodiversity, we had a lot of problems during the last 5 years. Like, why, if it's so obvious, we are having this backlash against this agenda?
Like, why I said that there's a failure from this indirect democracy is because of these examples of people's assemblies where the people made decisions on how we could take climate action, and they were completely disregarded by the people in power because they prioritized the interests of the corporations. So this is a clear case of corruption. This is a clear flaw of our democracy that cannot be solved because the people in power don't want it to be solved. So a very clear way to make this transition happen would be to listen to the people, and those measures that the people's assemblies made that were very clear, like we have to cut this amount of emissions by this year, which the politicians are completely ignoring. If those had been met, then we would be in a healthy democracy and we would be saving our world. But they were not met year after year with corporate corruption, with corporate lobbyism, and the politicians are still daring to call themselves green and call themselves, we are saving the world with our renewable macro projects. Well, all of those are lies. So how can you ask us to continue believing in you after failing to deliver what the people wanted that could save us out of the climate collapse?
Like you were speaking of the nature restoration law, for example. Yes, I think with the European Green Deal, Europe is really in the right way. I'm very happy with that. But the first thing that I thought when I read the text from the Green Deal was like, shit, what is going to happen right now? Because you make decisions, but you're really not aware what it is going to have the effect on all of different kind of countries. I have a big network of farmers in Italy, Portugal, France, Belgium. The nature restoration law was no problem for France. But for Belgium and the Netherlands, it was really threatening. Just a simple example, you can't plant trees on 1 hectare in Belgium that has a value of 100,000 euros. That's not possible. But then in France, it's like 6,000 euros. That's just very simple, but there's a lot of differences in Europe.
You gave this very negative impression of what politicians have done in the past, but you also both agree in saying that what politicians decide is super important for both, right? So my question is, how do you reconcile with politics in a sense that you help the change you want to see in the decisions that are made? I know sometimes citizens feel powerless, but we are young. I'm also maybe close to your age, a bit older, but we are young. We have a lot of tools at our hands. What do you feel like doing to change the reality of our political class?
So first of all, unfortunately, not everyone can become a politician. Like, that's a privilege that only some people that have the resources to go into that career and that have also the financial resources to be successful in it, because campaigns take money. They need finance. We need benefactors to be politicians. And second of all, I see a very clear way for people to have power and actually use the tools that our democracies have, but that are there taking dust. Let people see what kind of policies people like them came up with, let them see the policies that the politicians came up with, and then make a referendum and tell people, like, which one do you think can rule you better? we need power to the people. And the way to do that is not only by here talking, but when I go out of here, I will continue being a militant on the streets and disrupting the system till we make sure that we have power to the people.
Justine, when I hear you, obviously you want to farm sustainably, but what we saw in the media, certainly in the Netherlands and Belgium, is this dichotomy being created between the farmers and, for example, the climate movement. But when I hear you talking, I feel like we should be allies. So why do you feel that there's like this difference? And for Brittany, I'm a big believer in climate activism and the fact that it's necessary to enact radical change and move the debate forward. Obviously, I feel there should be a symbiotic relationship between climate activists like yourself and green parties all over Europe. But when I hear you, obviously the hope in politicians is not very high here, but that's an us problem, not a you problem. How can we improve this symbiotic relationship?
So we as farmers, we see that climate activists come to streets, and that's not a problem. It's a kind of democracy, I know that. And on one side, I'm very happy that they do that, that they let their voice here. But on the other side, I stand with my feet in the practice. They really have no idea how threatening some laws are for our farmers. That really doesn't work in the practice. And that's something I'm a bit angry about. And maybe they don't know everything about what is already going on, of what is already working.
I do think that we can work together because the climate justice movement actively supports the small and medium farmers and doesn't support the big corporations that pretend to be the small and medium farmers. I could definitely see us on the street together with the farmers and advocating for let's make the rich pay. Let's make the big agro-industry pay for all the damage they're doing and let the small and medium farmers own their land like they do and treat it and harvest it like they do. Like the principles of sovereignty and the principles of autonomy, I think that's something that we share.
I understand that you have the feeling that politics has failed you, and that's hugely problematic, but you said it yourself. We have no time to waste. I mean, basically, until the end of this decade, the next 5 years, they are absolutely important to maybe make sure to reach even the 2 degrees. I mean, we're not even talking about 1.5. We really need to have the action now, and we really need to work somehow together. So what do you expect from us, from politics, in order to gain back the trust so that we can actually do this together? Because if we are only fighting and not trusting each other and falling into small different pieces, we will not be able to solve the crisis.
I'm not losing the belief in politicians. I went to Canada and America last year to visit some farms, and I came back to Europe, and I was really proud that I came from Europe. And why? Because all the farmers there said, oh, you're from Europe, oh, what a sustainable and innovation country, and how do you manage your soil? And they did nothing about it. There, they are farming like my grandfather did in the past years. Here we are really a step above the top, for example. And we are already also on top of climate actions, but we can do more because we are a really strong and rich continent. I truly believe that there is a great future for me, but we have to keep going on and just pushing forward.
And it's very clear what politicians should do. All the things that you've promised you would do them. Don't say that we would do it by 2030. Do them now. Make a promise of what I'm going to do next month, of what I'm going to do in 2 months, and then make real mechanisms that make sure that the people can hold you accountable for that and for you failing to do it. Because I don't think that you would do it. Because as we're seeing right now, when the people, we rise up, when we protest and we say, like, we're headed to an extinction, we're headed to the collapse, who is facing the repression? People in Spain are getting criminal charges for doing non-violent climate activism. How can that happen in one of the leaders of democracy? That has to change, that we are allowed to protest in a non-violent way until we get that system change that we need.
I love the debate, but what kind of got lost is how climate change and the climate crisis is actually at the heart of inequality. Climate crisis will exacerbate inequality across all different social identities, from it being worse for women, for vulnerable poor people, for migrants. And I feel as Europeans, as politicians, we should put social policy at the heart of all our climate policies, not an afterthought in order to make it more swallowable for vulnerable people, but something that is at top of mind.
I liked Justine and her proactive approach, looking for solutions. To be honest, I was really angry about many things that Brittany said, and I was really sad that we couldn't interact more. It is far away from many, many people that I speak to every day. And to do as if nothing happens is just ignoring the facts. And then to go to the street and say, I'm militant, that is not the solution.
I particularly related with how they were a bit skeptical or a bit feeling distrust on politicians. That's also why I am running, because I felt that myself.
Was ich auch sehr spannend fand, dass sie anhand unserer Fragen, die wir Politiker gestellt haben, sie auch vielleicht verstanden haben, um was es uns geht. Und ich fand es gut zu sehen, wie ihre Reaktion darauf war. Vielleicht haben sie auch dann erkannt, dass man als Politiker eben auf Kompromisse eingehen muss und dass nicht alles immer schwarz-weiß ist.
I also regret that the Greens, that are all politicians, didn't say, you know, there are politicians, there are for something good. So it is very difficult to accept that the room is full of Greens and there is an allegation that nobody did anything for the environment here. Most of the decisions had the support of the Greens.
One topic that was mentioned there that I think was particularly important was about our European market and protecting sustainable practices here. One of the measures that, for me, I'm most excited to bring in the European Parliament is the introduction of sustainability criteria on our border, because this would, on the one hand, treat justly those like Justine that practice agriculture in a sustainable way, but also will encourage other countries to adopt our practices too if they want to trade with Europe. I think if we are creative, we can find solutions to the problems we face.
I liked very much the format, citizens debating each other and the politicians waiting to put some questions. I liked very much that there was a consensus between the young farmer and the young climate activist. I think that our duty now is to use all that argumentation, and the challenge is to implement the existing legislation, give tools to the farmers, financial support, and also to make positive steps, proving to the young climate activists that we are ready to do more.
I think it was not a debate, it was a conversation. Sometimes we, as politicians, also need to have more conversations in the sense of what is the best solutions. The political environment always forces you to say you're completely different than the other, but the conversation part, I think, is one of the ways to actually find also the solutions to fight the climate crisis.